It's that festive time of year again, and I have got some amazing tips for you to help keep all of your Christmas plants looking beautiful and flowering again for you next year. So we are talking your Amaryllis, your Poinsettias, your forced bulbs. All of those are not that hard to look after and can last for years and years with just a little bit of care and be beautiful houseplants for you all through the year and flower again for you every Christmas or really whenever you want to. So if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe because I've got loads more videos coming up for you. Right now we are going to start with one of my favorites, Amaryllis. Amaryllis are actually bulbs. So they're a generally quite large bulb. You can buy them from garden centres earlier on in the year. The ones that you buy in florists, supermarkets, convenience stores that, you know, are a package, grow your own Amaryllis flower, those bulbs have all been specially treated to make them want to flower for you just in time for Christmas. And that's the magic of Amaryllis. You can get these bulbs to flower for you whenever you want during the year. First thing you need to know is it is a bulb. So the leaves on that bulb will die back naturally. It doesn't mean the plant is dead. It just means it's taking a rest, and it needs to do that because it needs that rest to trigger it to flower again and look amazing for you. The second thing you need to know is that these live for years, and I mean years. You sometimes hear them being passed down generation to generation. So the parent bulb itself, the first bulb that you start with, eventually that is going to get so big that it's just knackered. It has given you all it can give you, it's flowered for you for years, and it has just had enough. And at that point, yes, it will die. But before it dies, it's going to make lots of little baby bulbs. Some people would call these daughter bulbs. So those little baby bulbs, every one of those is going to grow on to become a magnificent big Amaryllis, just like your original parent bulb, and the cycle will just continue and continue and continue. So once you have an Amaryllis bulb, you can have Amaryllis pretty much forever. These are a real collector's plant because there is so much variation in just the size of the flowers, the colour, the patterning on the petals, whether they're single or double or really blousy, almost sort of triple varieties. These are exquisite and they really are one of the easiest plants to grow. All you need to know about your Amaryllis is once your Amaryllis has finished flowering, so when the little flower buds on it have opened and flowered and been magnificent, and then they shrivel up and they die, at that point, cut off the flower stem only. Don't cut back any of the leaves, leave the leaves in place. So those leaves are going to gather up sunlight and feed all of that energy and nutrients back into the bulb to give it energy to flower next year. Like all bulbs, your Amaryllis bulb gets the energy for next year's flower this year. So if you don't fertilize your bulb and it's not getting very much sunshine and it's not a happy bulb, it won't have enough energy to make a flower for next year. It'll still make leaves, but it won't make a flower. Don't do this, but if you were to cut a bulb in half, you would see inside of it layers, almost like an onion. So those outer layers inside the bulb are going to grow and become the leaves, and right in the middle there's going to be a tiny, pretty much unrecognizable flower bud. So really genuinely your bulb has its flower in it for next year, this year. So it's really important that you leave those Amaryllis leaves to grow and flourish and put all that energy back into the bulb to give you beautiful flowers for next year. You want to put your Amaryllis somewhere where it's getting plenty of indirect sunlight. So not in a baking hot sunny window in the middle of summer, but over the winter, it's fine to put it in a window. If you're somewhere like us here in Ireland, where we get really quite grey weather over the winter, then it's fine to put it into a window. But just remember to move it before the really bright sunlight comes because you don't want to bake your bulb. So lots of bright indirect sunlight and temperatures. You don't want this sitting on top of a radiator. You don't want it absolutely cooked right beside the fireplace, but you do want to keep it warm. If you happen to live in a really lovely warm country where it never gets, even in the middle of winter overnight, never gets below sort of 5 degrees Celsius or about 41 degrees Fahrenheit, you never get frost, you never get cold, you can just grow these outside. But if you live somewhere like Ireland, they are going to be indoor plants their whole lives. So you need to treat them basically like all your other indoor house plants. Bright, indirect sunlight and as much of it as you can give them. Keep them away from really cold drafts and don't put them right by a direct heat source. While they're growing, after they've flowered and they've got those lovely big leaves that are trying to soak up all of that energy, give them some fertilizer. Give them a nice houseplant fertilizer diluted to the correct ratio. Keep the compost moist but not sodden, so you don't want them just sitting in a dish of water or the bulb will start to rot. But if you put your finger into the compost and it starts to feel a litlittle bit dry, give them some water. So it's usually only once or twice a week that you would need to water them, if that. If you want them to flower again for you around Christmas time, around midwinter, you need to tell them that that's where you want them to flower. And amaryllis are amazing this way. You can tell that bulb when you want it to flower again by giving it a period of dormancy. Now this sounds tricky, but it's not, I promise you. All it means is you take your amaryllis bulb in its pot with all its leaves and everything, and you put it somewhere cool and dark for 1 to 2 months. You stop watering it, you just ignore it, you forget about it, stick it under the stairs, stick it in the garage, stick it in a shed as long as the shed doesn't get too hot or too cold. Ideally, you want these sitting at about 13 degrees Celsius for that 1 or 2 months, and that is going to give them their dormancy period. So what is going to happen is when you stop watering your bulb and you put it somewhere cool and dark, all of the leaves are going to wither up and go brown and the whole thing is going to look dead. Do not panic and do not throw it away. It's supposed to do that. That's what the dormancy is. The dormancy is when all of those leaves put all of their nutrients back into the bulb. They shrivel up and die down, and then the bulb is there sitting, waiting, primed, ready to flower for you. So that's all dormancy is. A couple of months in the garage and don't water it. Then after it's had those couple of months, which you want to be doing in sort of late autumn, late fall, if you want it to flower at Christmas time, whenever you have given it that couple of months dormancy, take it out, pull the bulb out of the pot, get rid of all the old soil. Any roots that were there will have sort of shriveled up and dried up. Don't worry, the bulb is the important thing. So throw away that old compost, put it in the compost heap, use it to mulch your flower beds, whatever you like, but give that bulb fresh compost, water it, and put it back in its warm but not baking hot, bright but not really bright direct sunlight spot in your house. So bright indirect light, not too cold of a draft, warmer temperatures, and that is going to trigger it to start into its flowering cycle again for you. So it'll flower, it'll put on leaves, and then you do the whole thing over again. So you can time your amaryllis to flower pretty much whenever you would like it to. So if you would really like it not to flower until, say, January or February, you start it into its dormancy in early or midwinter instead of starting it in late fall. You have control over this. This is why these are such loved plants. So let's say, for argument's sake, and I'm not saying I have done this, but let's say you have gone a little bit overboard and you bought yourself 20 or 30 amaryllis bulbs. You don't necessarily want all of them to flower at once. So you can stagger your dormancy period. You can put some of them into dormancy in late fall, some of them into dormancy in early winter, some of them into dormancy in late winter, and then you'll have a continuous flower display of those gorgeous amaryllis. So around the festive time of year, you'll quite often get bulbs that are flowering completely out of season, narcissus or paper whites or hyacinths, which all look amazing. But the way that they have gotten those to flower now in the depths of winter instead of in early spring when they ought to be flowering is to trick them into thinking that they've already had winter. So basically the bulb supplier will have kept those in cold storage, in refrigeration for a number of weeks to trick them into thinking they've already had winter. So then when they're exposed to moisture and warmth again, they think, oh, it's spring, I'd better flower. So these bulbs have really used up all of their energy, and they've sort of been tricked and been made to think it's a time of year that it isn't. So they're going to flower for you, they're going to put out their leaves, but there's not really going to be the sunshine for them that they need, and it's not the right season for them. But that doesn't mean that you should throw them away. What it means is that you can plant these out in your garden, and the vast majority of these forced bulbs that you get are fine just to stick out in your garden, whatever part of the world you're in. Just put them in the ground. Always put the root end pointing down. If you really aren't sure which way up your bulb goes, and it can be tricky with some of the round ones, so don't feel silly if you're not sure, plant it on its side. So if you've got the bulb planted on its side, its roots will grow outwards and then downwards, its stem will grow outwards and then upwards. It will find its way. But if you plant it completely upside down, unfortunately, it's probably not going to grow for you. So if in doubt, plant it on its side. When you plant it out into your garden, it probably won't flower for you next year, or it will not flower very well for you next year. It's because it didn't get its proper whole growing season. It got tricked. It got fooled into flowering too early, so it didn't get the sunshine and the nutrients and the rain and all of the things that it was expecting. So if you pop it into the garden, you'll probably get maybe 1 or 2 flowers if you're lucky. You will definitely get leaves. And after that, the following year, you will have an amazing display of flowers. So don't give up on your bulbs, don't throw them away. Just don't expect them to be as amazing next year as they were this year, because they've really been pulled out of their natural cycle of things. So your paper whites, your narcissus, your hyacinths, even if you've got forced crocuses or other bulbs, once they have finished flowering, whenever your soil has defrosted and you can plant them out into the garden, plant them out, give them a chance to have a proper growing season, and you'll be rewarded by beautiful flowers year after year after year that will spread and grow and seed and produce extra bulbs. You can end up with an amazing display just from a few little bulbs that you didn't throw out, that you let go into the garden and have another life. Now, one plant that you can hardly move for seeing at this time of year here in Ireland are poinsettias. Now, these are exquisite. Those beautiful red petals are not petals, they're actually a modified kind of a leaf. The flowers themselves are tiny, tiny little things hiding in the middle of those big colourful bracts. But those colourful leaves, that bright red, almost velvety richness of poinsettias has really made them a perennial favourite at this time of year. Now, poinsettia's native habitat is sort of semi-dry forests in Mexico. So these are plants that do not get a lot of temperature fluctuations. These are plants that never have to deal with cold. And these are plants that don't require vast amounts of water. They're not rainforest plants by any stretch. I grew up in Adelaide, South Australia, which is a notoriously hot and dry part of the world. And one of our neighbours had a poinsettia bush growing in their garden that was as tall as the house. And it was magnificent, and it flowered every year in the middle of winter. In Australia, our Christmas, our Yule season, our festive season, is in the middle of summer. So I never really thought of poinsettias as a festive flower until I came here to Ireland. And since I have been here, I've really fallen in love with them. I just took this magnificent plant for granted when it was growing across the street from me all of those years. And now that I'm here, and I would love to have one again, this is not the climate for them at all. But never fear, you can grow these as a houseplant. So many poinsettias that are sold just die, and they die for 2 really simple reasons. One is people forget to water them, and 2 is people put them where they look their prettiest in the home, which is maybe right beside the radiator or right beside the fireplace, or somewhere where they're getting a cold draft out of the window, and they're just basically in a part of the house where they are not going to be happy. But if you can manage to keep your poinsettia alive to the end of the festive season, then you can start looking after it like you would any other houseplant. So, important things to know about poinsettias. They do not like excessive heat and they do not like excessive cold. They prefer a nice, steady, stable temperature pretty much all the time. So if you stick them somewhere that gets a freezing draft every time the door is opened, they're not going to be very happy. If you stick them on top of the radiator, they're going to die. So the golden rule of houseplants, somewhere that is warm but not roasting, somewhere that has bright sunlight but not direct sunlight pelting in through a south-facing window. So if you can stick your poinsettia somewhere where it's getting indirect sunlight, where it's going to be a fairly constant temperature, and if you can keep it watered whenever the soil starts to dry out, not having it sitting in a dish full of water, but just when the soil starts to feel dry, give it a little drop of water and give it a dose of houseplant feed every month or so. Your poinsettia will become a beautiful houseplant. These are really rewarding to grow. Once you find the right spot for them in your house, the hard work is done. The tricky part with so many houseplants is just finding the part of the house where you like how they look there and the plant enjoys the conditions that it have there. Poinsettias are not very demanding in this regard. There are some houseplants that are really fussy about humidity and this, that and the other. Poinsettias aren't. As long as you can find it that spot where it's going to get a bit of indirect sunlight and not have too many temperature fluctuations, they're actually dead easy to grow. Now, when we say temperature, what we are talking about is a temperature range of sort of 18 to 21 degrees Celsius, which is 65 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So the nice thing is that is just about the temperature that we like our homes to be anyway. So you aren't being asked to give this plant some extravagantly different conditions from what you're going to want to live in anyway. Our homes naturally get a little bit cooler in the evenings, and that suits the poinsettias down to the ground. Plants are an amazing gift, an amazing thing to bring into our homes, an incredible enrichment for our lives. So whether you're bringing in foliage from the garden or whether you're bringing in an actual plant into your house, it is just a lovely way to add richness and luxury and brightness and freshness to this special time of year. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a pleasure to have your company, and I hope you have a very happy festive season.